Hi, this is Sean O'Brien with Auzmor, and today we're here to talk about toxic leadership. My guest here is Dr. Burl Randolph Jr. Dr. Burl here, Doctor of Management, Organizational Leadership, Master of Strategic Studies, Master of Business Administration, retired Colonel in the U.S. Army, winner of the 2014 Doctoral Leadership Scholarship, member Delta Mu Delta International Honor Society in Business, and founder of President and Chief Consultant of My Wingman LLC. So, yeah, I dare you to find someone more qualified to speak on this topic. How are you, Dr. Burl?
I'm great, Sean. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you so much for joining us here today. So, how and why did you go out and get all of these incredible accolades?
Well, Sean, you made the comment that there may not be anyone more qualified than me. I don't know about that, but I'm a very, very deliberate person.
Yeah.
Spending so much time in the Army, 32 years. Mm-hmm. When I became a junior executive, I didn't feel as if I had enough to lead in a peacetime Army at the time. Right. I was trained to do the wartime stuff, but the peacetime stuff, the organizational things, working with civilians, which to that point I had not really done. So I decided to obtain a Master's of Business Administration because I would be leading people that had been in their jobs 10, 15, 20 years. What is a young major like me going to tell them about their job?
Right.
But with my MBA, I knew what they knew and possibly a little bit more. So we could have very, very good conversations.
Yeah.
The Master of Strategic Studies, that was really a bonus from attending the U.S. Army War College.
Yeah.
As a colonel, once you get to that level, you're dealing strategically. Right. You're briefing members of Congress, members of the Senate, possibly the President of the United States. Yeah. Everything you do on a daily basis is strategically. So you do need the tools to be able to think strategically and act strategically.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we can just jump right into it. First off, if we could define a few things, number one being, what is leadership?
Well, Sean, I look at leadership, it's an art, not necessarily science, it's the art of influencing and directing people in such a manner as to obtain their willing obedience, confidence, respect, and loyal cooperation to make them successful and to make the organization successful.
Yeah. And so going off of that, how would you define toxicity?
The true definition of toxicity is poisonous, right? Yeah. So toxic, chemical, degrades, compounds together are poisonous. And so something that's toxic is something that's poisonous, something that degrades, something that deteriorates, something that destroys.
Right. So now that we have those kind of definitions set in place, we're leading somewhere, right? All right. So next, what's the incongruity between leadership and toxicity?
Well, you hear the term toxic leadership.
Right.
And the reason I believe it's an oxymoron because toxic is poisonous.
Right.
And leadership helps you become successful.
Yeah.
So how can you put those two together?
Right.
The sole purpose of leadership is to make us all better.
Right.
Toxicity doesn't do that. So there are no toxic leaders or managers, just toxic people in leadership and management positions.
How have those toxic people then kind of redefined leadership, if at all?
Well, first of all, the term itself, toxic leader.
Yeah.
It's not mean person. We hear bad bosses. We see the movie and stuff like that.
Right.
But it's toxic because of the impact that it has on people. And there are books, there are articles, there are journals. There's an immense amount of research to what I consider this antisocial behavior.
Yeah. So we're jumping ahead of, and there's some questions from our viewers and things like that. So first off, with all the work you do, right? My Wingman LLC, you do phenomenal work with leaders, execs, managers, whatever it may be, to strengthen their skills and everything. Yes. I have to ask you, do you come across toxic leaders often? No need to name names, just.
In civilian life, not very often.
Yeah.
I ran across a few in military life.
Right.
There's probably certain characteristics, if you will, that identify toxic leaders. Some of those characteristics are the narcissist, the person that thinks that, you know, he or she is God's gift to the world.
Right.
Then, of course, the obvious ones, the bully, the insecure person, the, sad to say, the incompetent.
Right.
The person who can't do their job, but they mask that through antisocial behavior. There are all kinds of different characteristics for toxic leaders. It's just the way that the way they come across, if you will, in the work environment.
Yeah. So I kind of digress here. Can a leader become a toxic leader over time? Maybe due to the organization's culture, or actually changing them from a good leader into a toxic one.
I'd say that they can, if they allow themselves to become a toxic leader. You mentioned a very good point, Sean, organizationally. There are some organizations, the culture in that organization is toxic.
Right.
They've had toxic leaders for years, whether it's the business owner or the executives or coworkers. A coworker can create, and I'm sure you and I have both seen it, a coworker can create a toxic environment in an organization. The difference is that coworker, we're equals.
Yeah.
So we can get with the coworker, we can tell them what we think, how we feel, and we're one-on-one.
Yeah.
The toxic leader or manager gives us a paycheck.
Right.
Well, provides us, I won't say they give it, we work for it, but they provide us a paycheck.
Yeah.
And that's the reticence. They control our livelihood. And so a toxic leader may be allowed to do things, or often are allowed to do things that you would never put up with from your coworker.
Right. And it's kind of funny because if we really think about it, if you as a leader go into an organization and allow that organization's any negative influences to change you into a toxic leader, that's almost being a follower and you're not a leader to begin with, right? So, yeah, and the reason I ask this, what are some characteristics or things to look for, in employees or retention or whatever it may be? Because as we all know, right, people quit managers, not jobs. So is there any other signifiers that hey, there might be, a manager or some type of leadership around this individual that's not working or needs to be addressed due to toxicity?
Well, Sean, remember years ago when Facebook first came out, what were employers doing? They were checking Sean's Facebook page to see if he was saying things, doing things, acting a certain way that would not be in alignment with their company policy, right? Okay, companies still do that. They check social media because Burl sounds good and he briefs well. However, is this the real Burl? You mentioned my website. So the picture on my Wingman, LLC, the bespectacled, scholarly-looking gentleman calling himself Dr. Burl. Is he really like that, or is he stark raving lunatic?
Yeah, right.
With social media, you can check just about anybody out. So I would sort of go with Sun Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, author of The Art of War, who said, "Know thy enemy and know thyself." And it's sad to think that the person as an enemy, however, we put our trust into boards, into organizations, to our HR, to hire what we think is a good, normal person.
Right.
Only to find out later on, maybe they're not.
Yeah.
You can check out anybody, Sean.
Yeah.
You can check out your future boss.
Yeah.
You can go to their social media pages, or in my case, I work with 4 toxic leaders. 2 of them, I was forewarned from people that worked for them before. The other 2, I had no idea.
Right.
And one of them, you're sitting around with your colleagues. Hey, who's going to be the new CEO? Sean O'Brien. Ooh. Okay, that's a pretty big. That would never happen. But I'm just using Sean as an example. I've never worked for Sean or anything like that, so I'm just using Sean as an example because he's here. So, but that actually happened, and so I should have dove a little bit deeper into their reactions. I mean, they were very forthcoming in letting me know that this person is not somebody you want to work for or be around. In another instance, I had someone come to me as the CEO and say, "Hey, sir, would you like to know a little bit more about the incoming chairman?" Sure, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Likes to holler, likes to scream. Got to the point that when people saw him coming, they'd go the other direction. If there was a window to jump out, people jump out of it because they just didn't want to be bothered with him. So I was forewarned about this person. And so there's nothing wrong with digging a little bit deeper to find out, is this person a narcissist? Is this person a bully? Is this person an incompetent? Is this person an isolator? Is this person a quiet assassin?
Right.
What I've also found is that a lot of the literature categorizes toxic leaders into certain singular characteristics, and I just named a few of them.
Right.
The narcissist, the bully, the instigator, the ruthless person. I found that they have a number of those characteristics.
Yeah.
The toxic leader that you out as being incompetent then becomes a bully.
Right.
Well, I just named 3 right there. And then what do they do about it? Well, maybe they become the isolator where no one talks to Sean anymore because
Right.
the boss doesn't talk to Sean anymore. Or your toxic coworkers, because we all have a few of them
Right.
that they lie below the surface. The toxic leader will co-opt them to help them undermine you, make your job a little bit more stressful, possibly push you out of the organization.
Here's the key issue, though. If you are an employee, right, of a toxic leader, which often toxic leaders can create fear, right? I'm afraid of this person.
Right.
What can you do to help alleviate, the situation?
Right.
Should you speak to them? Like, what's the best course of action as an employee?
Right. Well, I mentioned the first one was do your homework. Figure out who this person is that's coming in. Because again, before, whoever showed up just showed up. You didn't know anything about them. You couldn't get any background. Now you can. Again, talk to other people. Learn a little bit about them. Again, know your enemy. The second part is know yourself. You and I both know the 2 ends of the tails. We know the person that no matter what is done to them, no matter what is said, no matter how you treat them, they will never say a word.
Right.
They are fodder for the toxic leader.
Yeah.
Because that's the person, that becomes my whipping boy or whipping girl.
Yeah.
We have coworkers on the other end of the scale that you say the wrong thing to them, they may punch you in the nose.
Right.
Well, I don't care who you work for. If you punch somebody in the nose, generally you get fired.
Right.
But then there's the rest of us just like right there in the middle. So you have to know yourself. You have to know what are your red lines. Don't holler at me. Don't scream at me. Don't curse at me. Don't talk about my mom.
Right.
Those are my 4. And people kind of laugh when I say that. I'm like, well, it's true.
Right.
Don't get into my space.
Yeah.
Okay? Because now I feel threatened.
Right.
And don't give me an ultimatum. And these are things that toxic leaders do on a regular basis. We all get a little upset every now and then, may raise our voice or something like that, may say a curse word here or there, but to put up with this every day, that's what toxic leaders do. Those are my red lines. I don't put up with that. I have gotten up and walked out of meetings, and this is when I was in uniform.
Yeah.
I've gotten up and walked out of meetings. I will not tolerate this, sir, and walked out.
Right.
I'm not putting up with this. So if you don't know your red lines or have your red lines because you've led the charmed life and never had to deal with somebody like that,
Right.
then I sure hate it for you, but you sort of have to know yourself. The last thing would be options. How can you, if you can, how can you work with this person? How can you work around this person? Is it worth staying at that job?
Yeah.
Can you get another job? Do you have another means of employment? I hate to use the word confrontation because those don't necessarily end well for the person doing the confronting.
Right.
But like I told my son once when I was a CEO, and I said, hey, if I ever seem out of sorts to you guys when I come home from work, just let me know. So I came home one evening, my oldest son was going up to bed. He said, Dad, are you mad at me? I said, no. Why? Then why are you talking to me that way? He's 7 or 8 years old. And I was like, oh. Sometimes people don't realize how they come across.
Yeah.
They really don't. And sometimes you can just kind of mention to someone, well, Burl, why are you raising your voice to me? Or why are you acting the way you're acting? Or somebody asked me once, you got a burr under your saddle? Excuse me? Do you have a burr under your saddle about something? And it made me realize that whether I did or didn't, that was the way I was coming across.
Right.
So sometimes it's just sitting down, talking to people, telling them the way they come across. If you don't think you can do that, another method is we won't talk about you. We'll talk about me. Okay? Because I can't control your behavior,
Right.
but I can control the way it makes me feel.
Right.
So, Sean, when you raised your voice to me back there in the cubicle and kind of shouted me out, I felt like this. Or when you fronted me out in the conference room in front of the entire C-level staff, it made me feel this way. And where you did this is the way I felt. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about your behavior,
right,
but I'm talking about the way it made me feel. Yeah. And so it causes the person to think a little bit more, a little bit better. You can also attempt to go to the next higher, but I read an article once that said toxic leaders kiss up and kick down.
Yeah.
Their boss doesn't know they're a toxic leader, 'cause they're pretty smart, they're pretty shifty.
Right.
They kiss up, but they kick down.
Right.
And so their boss doesn't necessarily know, and in some instances, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Right.
Their boss is just as toxic as they are. So you have to be very, very careful with doing things of that nature. Mm-hmm. I've seen it where lawsuits, class action suits, where an organization files suit against this person. Toxic leaders have a tendency to say things that are contrary to federal law. They talk about your age, they talk about your gender, they talk about your race, they talk about your family. Like I say, talk about my mom, it's a different story. We're gonna get into a fight.
Right.
But they have a tendency to do stuff like that because they have free reign.
Right.
And so sometimes employees can band together and identify there being more than one instance of this person being toxic. Because sometimes when just one person tries to stand up to the bully, maybe they get punched, maybe they don't.
Right.
But if you have a group of people doing the same thing, then it kind of calms them down. Another technique, and it may sound weird, ignore them.
Yeah.
I had a boss who would send me emails, very, very, not intimidating, but would get my dander up, because that's what they're trying to do.
Right.
So I would respond back. So my right-hand man told me, well, sir, it's being said that you're bordering on insubordination. I don't care. I'm not putting up with that email.
Right.
So I mentioned it to a peer of mine. He said, ignore him.
Yeah.
What? Ignore him.
Yeah.
He was sending me emails like that. My right-hand man said, ignore him.
Yeah.
If he wants something from you, he'll come to you.
Right.
3 days of ignoring him, the email stopped. Email stopped. We went on to have just a regular relationship.
Yeah.
Just a normal person. Sometimes the toxic leader wants to see what you're made of.
Yeah.
Will you stand up for yourself?
Kind of the
Will
kid.
you? Yeah. I mean, just
testing to see what they
just
can
testing
get
the
away
waters,
with.
testing
Right.
to see what they can get
Yeah.
away with. Trying to see. I mean, just kind of archaic.
Right.
You shouldn't be doing that in 2019.
Yeah.
But there are people that do that.
And I always think of a company like sports, right? Like basketball.
Yeah.
You're not having your 7-foot center dribbling the ball up and down the court. That's the point guard's job, right? So yeah, center, gets the ball down low, scores or whatever, but the point guard is the guy running the operation, but you got the shooting guard needs to be there to, be the athletic one, whatever you'd like. Your position is good too, whatever, whoever's watching this. But, and that's how it operates, making sure you allocate responsibilities and correctly, right, within an organization.
So what if people are mismatched? You show up at the organization, you're the new leader, you're pulling your hair out because nothing is going right.
Right.
Absolutely nothing is going right. You're becoming a little toxic yourself, but it's because you don't realize that the organization is misaligned.
Right.
You have people in jobs that they shouldn't be in. They're bringing down the organization. Things aren't going the way they should. Maybe you as the leader, because you asked the question before, can a non-toxic leader become a toxic leader?
Right.
You can if you don't take evaluation and stock of the organization that you're in. And again,
Right.
there's no toxicity. No one is doing anything, quote unquote, wrong. Mm-hmm. They're just misaligned.
Right.
You have the person with a very analytical mind as your customer service person, greeting people at the door.
Right.
Hello, Sean. How are you? Good to see you. You have the
Yeah.
person that's light, bubbly, energetic, outgoing. She's in back trying to do analytics, or he's in
Right.
back trying to do analytics, hating life.
Right.
Absolutely hating life. I had a client like that. Maybe you need to make some changes. Switch it around. Both sections went up about 100% by just doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now you're not pulling your hair out anymore.
Right.
You're not going crazy. You're not bordering on toxicity because you're so angry. You've just reorganized the organization to the way it should be, or the way it needs to be to run effectively. So again, it does happen sometimes, and I should know from personal experience.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it kind of lends itself to the entire conversation, making a full circle. It's more effective if you focus on the individual rather than, hey, just work harder, you'll figure it out, right? Get this done. Learning what makes them tick and everything. So closing remarks, why toxic leadership is an oxymoron. What are the top things that viewers should be taking away from our conversation today in terms of toxic leadership?
Some of the top things, Sean, are that really there are no toxic leaders or managers, but toxic people.
Right.
Identify them as toxic people. Again, learn about whoever it is you're working for. Learn as much about them as you can, because there's reasons behind the way they are.
Right.
Know yourself and how much you can deal with, how much you can put up with. Identify your options. Can I stay here? Can I leave? Can I get another job? Can I talk to this person? Can I change the culture?
Right.
That's another one. Can my presence, the way I act, the way I interact, can I change the culture? You have to know what the options are, but don't simply accept that that's just the way Burl is.
Right.
No, there's a reason why Burl is the way he is. Sometimes Burl doesn't know it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it needs to be communicated. And again, not always in an aggressive manner, but again, it needs to be communicated in a manner that Burl understands. But you have to know a little bit about Burl to know how to approach him, to get to him, and hopefully reduce and or eliminate the toxicity in his personality and in the workplace.
Awesome. All right, Mr. Dr. Burl Randolph Jr., so amazing to have you here. Thanks for all the viewers. Once again, my Wingman LLC, the president, CEO, he does phenomenal work, and we're happy to have you here today at Auzmor.
I appreciate it, Sean. Thank you so much.
Yeah.